let's just jump into our first guest. Again, that's Steve Moskowitz. I'm Chip Franklin. This is George Nagle. He's a former global executive director of marketing. His portfolio had a responsibility over $352 million, and he used a lot of creative, innovative ways in a business to drive profit and loss. And we're always interested in profit and loss, right? I mean,
absolutely.
Yeah. Joining us right now is Mr. Nagle. Hi, George. Where are you right now? What part of the world?
Hi. So I'm out of Lansing, Michigan. So the state capital here in the wonderful state of Michigan.
Yep. Great state. Yeah. Let's talk about this right out of the get-go and talk a little bit about the idea of profit and loss and how
I prefer profit.
Right. Although it's nice to have losses on paper at the end of the year as well, right?
The sweetest thing in life is a positive cash flow with a tax loss. Now you're talking my language, Chip.
Let's talk a little bit about this goes back decades, but the idea of positive thinking and the other one too, thinking outside of the box. When you hear that phrase, I'm kind of curious from both of you. Let me start with you, George. What does that make you think of when you think of thinking outside the box? What does that mean to you?
So to me, that really means that people recognize that they may be a little stagnant and they feel a need for change. And Chip, the funny part about that is when you say that to people, they're like, yeah, we need to change. And then as soon as I say to them, great, who's going to change first? Dead silence.
Yeah.
And a lot of that comes down to when organizations are usually saying that, what they are lacking isn't necessarily a need for change. It's a need for better execution within the field that they already play in. And then they can bring in some different thinking, some breakthrough thinking, not necessarily thinking outside of their box. Because, Chip and Steve, the best present you can ever give a kid is a box because they can make it anything that they want. And companies miss that. You can make your box whatever you want it to be. You don't have to be outside of it. As a matter of fact, being inside of it gives you structure and allows you to execute.
Yeah, Steve, what do you think? That's a really interesting point. What's your take on that phrase?
That's so important because the whole idea of being an entrepreneur is you think things up. If you're in a box, somebody already did that. There's really not any money in it. Thinking outside the box, when you think of something that somebody doesn't, that's where you make the money. And how many times have you heard a friend, somebody thinks up something simple? When you and I were infants, the pet rock came out. And how many people came out and said, oh, why didn't I think of that? My God, you take this little stone and people are paying you so much money for it because nobody else thought about it. And, when you go to business school, they don't teach you create a pet rock. That's creative. That's outside the box.
Well, remember Jackson Pollock put that frame, just that white frame up with nothing on it. And he said, he goes, more people talked about that than all of my works combined. And that was the point. So that's truly outside. And, as a writer, if you told me to write 2,000 words, I have the freedom now because I know where I can start, where I begin, and how much is there. Speaking of numbers, when you're talking about this innovative way of thinking, Steve, how often does that happen in your practice that somebody comes in and you see a brand new way that they can go with their income, their investments? Is that a common occurrence where people come in?
It is. And what I'd say is it's not that I think up something new for each new client, but there's a lot of the things we do, the clients and their advisors never heard of it. So I'm doing something new for this client that I've done for a lot of others. And that's why I became a tax attorney after I was already a practicing CPA, because I wanted to say, hey, if you do X instead of Y, you can really save a lot of taxes. Look at the Fortune 500.
Yeah. George, you've launched products in difficult times. It looks like we're in and headed for maybe possibly some more difficult times. Another bad day in the market this morning. And I don't know how much that, it's hard right now to, it reminds me of 1978 when the stagflation, we have the beginning of a recession, but we still have inflation. When you're going to launch something in a market like that, what are some of the challenges in the way you think and the way you approach that kind of period in this kind of time?
So there's two setups to that, right? So the first setup is what many companies currently do. They see that, they start to look at where their costs are, and then they'll start to look at where their people are and try to reassess and spread them out and get a little bit thinner so that they're taking a defensive stance to whatever's coming. The other side of that, which is just some different approach or a different way to think about it, is instead of doing that, get into conversations with customers who are doing that, find where they actually have value. And a lot of companies, Chip, will talk about how they do VOC, and they really don't. They just don't do it right. But when you can get to that value and bring them in as part of what you are creating, and I don't mean just an ancillary phone call, I mean literally bring them in and get them excited, you'll have orders on the books before you ever launch. And then you don't have to worry about what the market's doing because you just created a new one.
That's, and that's funny. Because this next question, Steve, is right down your bailiwick, which is: are there innovative ways to use capital to grow, or protect it in times that we might be?
Oh, absolutely. And I remember an old story about a real estate agent who said they took all their capital. They're a brand new real estate agent. They were starting out in business, and she spent it all on a fancy car. People said, "You spent all your money on a fancy car. What's wrong with you?" And she said, "I have to show the clients that I'm successful." And in her particular case, she became very successful, and that worked for her. Or, look at Mary Kay and her pink Cadillacs, or other things. And again, what you're trying to do is distinguish yourself. Whatever sold you when a person came to you and said, "Hi, Chip, I'm just like everybody else." Okay, what do you have to offer me? As opposed to, "Hi, Chip, I have something better for you than all the other people are offering you."
Let me ask you guys, what do you think of this thought? Because this is kind of where I've come to in my life. I don't trust easy. When somebody says, I had a friend that's just telling me about a stock the other day, and it looks like in a perfect position to buy, and everybody's saying this is it, and like my radar automatically flips on when if somebody tells me something incredibly difficult, but they say if you achieve it, you'll gain a reward, that I can trust. And in both your guys' fields, it seems to me that trust is such a big part of this. I mean, you're messaging innovative ways for people to grow, right? And in some way, in the word innovative, obviously nothing's new, but some things have a new coat of paint. For both of you, do you kind of subscribe to the thing that, when somebody says it's easy, your radar should go up? I'll ask you first, George.
So absolutely, if I hear the word easy, my radar is just off the roof, because I need to make the distinction between something being simple and something being easy. Simple concepts are often the most difficult to execute. And that's where people get hung up, is on the execution of any idea. But if somebody says, "Oh no, this is really easy," okay, why is it easy? And if it's so easy, then why isn't everybody else doing it? And if they are, well, that's called commodity play eventually, right? And you're not getting the margins and the higher revenue. You're not getting that cash flow, right, Steve? That is so attractive, that comes with something that's a little bit more of a challenge, something that's difficult, something that brings real value to people, because nobody wants the same old, same old.
So what I've always said is, if it's easy, there's no money in it.
Mm-hmm. That's true, right? And I think that, this is one of the things I've always loved about, especially right now, having you two guys together, is it would seem that you are in different camps, but in fact, the idea of getting people excited about the possibilities of where they are in life. Again, if my mom I got a 401k going when I was 20 years old, right? My mother made me save money. Every time I got paid for something, I had to take 10% out and put it away. That was hard, right? It was difficult, and I didn't fully understand it, but I trusted her. Mm-hmm. Steve, I'm sure you've had that conversations with people before, in difficult times. You've had people in your office, I'm sure, that maybe didn't want to give their name at first, but that's the benefit of a tax attorney, right?
Oh, absolutely. And, trust is something extremely valuable. It has to be earned. And like everything else, would you want to do anything with somebody you didn't trust? Because, well, then if you don't trust him, he's going to cheat you, cause you harm, and there's all kinds of problems. On the other hand, what's the ultimate trust? Having surgery where you say, okay, put me to sleep and then take a knife and cut into me. That's the ultimate trust.
George, the next time we have you on the show, I'm trying to get Steve to write a book, not just based on his acumen, but his stories and his thoughts on a lot of things that I think that would be valuable for people to know. I see some of your books in the background. Which one can we tell people to check out right now that's emblematic of how you believe and where you're headed?
Well, so fortunately for me, the 4 books behind me, 3 of them are actually composite to one of the books. So it's the Breakthrough Thinking series, and it talks about a lot of different concepts that, again, are going to sound simple, but are extremely difficult to execute. And that's where the value really brings.
That's what Steve said, right? There's no money in easy.
He is absolutely right.
All right. George, thank you so much. Will you come back again with us, please?
Absolutely. Steve, Chip, I appreciate the time. Great conversation.
All right.
We appreciate it. Thanks so much.
And we'll get your link out as well, and have a copy of the show so you can see it. And thank you so much. We really appreciate your time. Okay.
Thank you.